the yard.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
A good-sized man, or something that looks like a man.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was.
Welcome to Sasquatch Hypotheses.
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Dia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
Son of a bitch is about 6'9".
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
And the guy is on foot.
I don't know what... It's a big, real big person.
But it is a person.
Yeah, I'd say it was a person, somebody really big.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to Sasquatch Hypotheses. I apologize for the show starting so late tonight. We had a small hiccup with our guest tonight. He's a on the road trucker, and he had to do a pickup at 9 o'clock. But just to be clear, the live show will be every Sunday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. So just to make sure, I don't think I made that distinction of Eastern Time when I announced it before. But just click the bell icon down below, and you should get notified, because I'm going to hit the schedule ahead of time, and you should get notified of when the show's getting ready to start. So let's go ahead and get started. Bring Ryan on. Ryan, you there?
How you doing? Yep, how you doing?
All right. So we left off, you had talked about your encounters as a youth, but you had a more interesting encounter later on in life. You want to go ahead and get started, lead us up to that, walk us into it, and tell us what happened.
Yeah, okay, so not very long, a couple of years after where we left off last time I was talking to you, I actually decided to join the Army. And so I puttered around in the Army for several years, and about 2011 I re-enlisted, and they offered to send me up to Alaska, and I jumped all over that. I had always wanted to go to Alaska, and it was a pretty easy way to get up there. And so they sent me up to Alaska. I got there right at the tail end of 2012. Drove up there from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and that was about December. It was right before Christmas when I got up there, and so jumped right into when you go to a new base, they send you to a replacement unit where you learn all the rules and special features the particular knowledge that you need to know to abide by at that base. And so I went to that for a week or two, and they had speakers come in, and they'd tell us about what we need to know about the cold and what we needed to know about the wildlife and everything around there, and general straightforward stuff. Anyone that's been in the military knows what I'm talking about. And so after that, they pushed me out to my unit, and as soon as I got to my unit, I found out that we were deploying. So they were already starting to do their training for their upcoming deployment when I got there. So I was thrust right into that. And early in the spring, it was just a few months after I got there. It was probably around March or so, I would think. We were doing a training exercise out in the field on Fort Richardson, which is where I was stationed. And we were out there for about 10 or 12 days or so, and we did this a couple of days of training that was specifically geared to self-recovery and record training. I was in a mechanic, and I was in in a truck company up there, a transportation company, and being an NCO, they had put me in charge of this recovery section. So it was my guys and myself out there conducting this training and doing testing on it and stuff. And then they had observers out there, a couple of higher enlisted people grading us. And we were out in this place called, I can't remember for sure, it's either called Bulldog Run or Bulldog Trail, but it's on the far east side of Fort Richardson. It's across the Glen Highway up in the mountains there, east of Anchorage. And it's pretty mountainous terrain. There isn't but just a few roads back in there anyway, and most of them aren't accessible by anyone without prior permission. But we had permission. We were out there doing training, and we had spent the whole day out there. And at some point during the day, while we were doing this training, I had dropped my cell phone. It had fell out of my pocket. Is what it turned out to be, is it fell out of my pocket. I couldn't find it anywhere. But at the time, I didn't even know I had lost it. You know, we wrapped up our training and we headed back to our camp, which was several miles away, clear on the other side of base. And so evening comes along, and I'm unpacking my things from the day, and I want to check my phone and look for any missed calls or whatnot, and I can't find it anywhere. So I tear all my stuff apart and go through it looking for this phone. I go out to where the trucks are parked, and I go through all the trucks and looking, down under the seats and on the floors and stuff. Anywhere it might be, I can't find it anywhere. And it occurs to me that I must have dropped it out there in the training area. And it's snowing. There's a bit of snow on the ground already, but it's starting to snow pretty hard. And I went and I told my platoon sergeant what had happened. He's like, "Well, I can't let you out of here right now, not to go look for a phone. I mean, we're going to be out of here tomorrow anyway. I'm just going to have to go look for it then." And there's no arguing with him. That's what had to be done. So next day comes around, and we pack up camp, and we head on back to the motor pool and get everything put away. And around about noon, 1 o'clock or so, they release us. And I told my platoon sergeant and my warrant officer that I was going to walk back out to, I told him that I was going to drive out to where the training area was and go look for my phone. And my warrant officer told me that I'm not going to be able to drive out there. The gate's going to be closed. And that I'm not supposed to be out there really anyway. But he told me that if I am going to go out there, dress warmly, take some supplies, some water, some food, all of that stuff. And my platoon sergeant actually gave me his spare cell phone. He had a government phone that he just kept on him. So he gave me his personal cell phone so that at least I'd have communication out there, and also, as it would turn out, would help me find the phone that I had lost. So I left work and I went back to the barracks, and I changed out my clothes and packed a bag, a rucksack with some MREs and some water, and committed a big no-no and took a shotgun out there with me and stuff, because I don't want to be unprepared out there. And I drove out to the gate of this training area and parked, and I took off walking. Now, anybody that's not familiar with the area, this Bulldog Trail area it's from the gate out to the actual training area is a good solid 7 or 8 miles. It is a long jaunt out there, and I walked this. I walked all the way out there, and you go across a small bridge that Chip Creek goes under, and it's just this long straight stretch for a while until you get to almost to the south edge of the base, almost to the city limits of Anchorage, and then you do a 90-degree sharp left on the road, and then you start heading out towards the mountains. And so I'm out probably about, I don't know, I'd have to say at least 6 miles, maybe pushing a little further than that out there. And I'm getting into the foothills of these mountains where the road's starting to wind around a little bit, and I get to this long sweeping curve around to the left, and it's forested on both sides, spruce and we got some kind of leafy tree up there. I can't remember what it was, but the forest isn't too thick. You can see it decently at this point. Nothing too bad. And there's this big field that kind of starts near the road on the left side and then pushes back a good mile or so off into the distance up against another hillside. Kind of fills up this valley, and then past that there's some training areas. There's like a urban warfare training area and whatnot. And so I'm going around this long curve, and when I get to the where I can start seeing the straight stretch of the road again up in front of me, I start getting this feeling of being watched. I can tell there's something watching me, and the hair starts standing up on my arms and my neck, and I don't see anything though, and I don't hear anything, but I can just feel I just feel like something's not right, you know. Maybe I shouldn't be there, or something doesn't want me there. But I keep pushing on, and the further I go, the worse I'm feeling. At times it was just becoming almost unbearable. But again, I never saw anything, never heard anything. And this road goes on straight for a little ways, probably a good half mile or so, and then it curves back around to the right again. And as I started going around that curve to the right, the feeling it starts to go away. The further I get around the curve and the road behind me starts to disappear, the feeling just kind of goes away. And I started feeling better, and wasn't quite sure what was going on with that, but I didn't think too much of it, and I pressed on. And I worked my way down towards the end of the road where the training area we had been was, and there's probably about 10 or 12 inches of snow on the ground, and most of that had fallen since the night before. So I knew there was no way I was going to find my phone just by looking at it. And I was praying that I had some battery left on it, and I was praying that I had the volume turned up on it. So I took out the phone that my platoon sergeant had loaned me, and I started calling it. And I would call it, and I'd walk about 20 feet or so, and I'd call it again. And I did this for, I don't know, I probably did this 15 or 20 minutes. And finally, I hear it ringing. Oh, and I was so happy. I was relieved. So I kept doing that, calling it and letting it ring, and I was able to home in on it. It was laying right in the middle of the road, underneath all this snow, right where we'd been training. And I dug it out, and it still had a little bit of charge on it. It was almost dead, though. It wouldn't have lasted too much longer with that cold. So I was very grateful and thankful that I found it when I did. And I shove it in my pocket, and I started heading back out the way I'd came. And I was kind of apprehensive going back the way I'd came. I mean, there's not another way out of there, but I knew that something had been watching me, or something was wrong in that area that I had walked through, because I'd been out in the woods my whole life. I'm used to seeing, well, not seeing, but feeling like things are watching me. But it's usually just animals or whatnot. It never bothered me before, but something about this was just much more intense, and I just felt much more, almost like a feeling of dread at the idea of having to walk back through there. I was not looking forward to it. And I had actually contemplated with the idea of walking cross country back to the start of the road, because the road essentially, for all of its length, makes a giant L. And so I thought about doing that, and ultimately decided that it would be much harder to do that. With that kind of distance, it'd be very easy to get lost. Now, there's downfall, and plus the snow, and plus not really knowing the area that well. Decided that the best course of action was just to take the road back, and it started started snowing a bit, and so that was another reason that I just wanted to stick to the road, because I knew that it was supposed to snow quite a bit that night. That was most of the reason that we had left the field, was because of the storm rolling in. So I start walking back, and I get back to that last long corner, the one that was the last place I had felt that feeling of being watched. And as I was coming back around it, the feeling returned as I come around the corner and could see the straightaway ahead of me. That feeling was back on me, and I felt like there was something watching me again. I felt uneasy and nervous. I just didn't want to be there, and I'm trying to think to myself, what is this? Why am I feeling this way? I know there's nobody out here. My truck was the only one parked at the gate. It had snowed since we had last been training in there, and there was no tracks on the road. There's no other way to get there except for the way I had got there. So I was feeling like it was a pretty safe bet to rule out that it was people out there. I mean, the training area was closed. Nobody lives anywhere near there. And nobody had came in the way I had, so there was obviously not likely anyone out there. Bears were hibernating. There was no reason to think there was a bear out there unless it was one that had woke up early for some reason. That'd be real early, and it just didn't strike me that it was a bear. You know, come across moose all the time out in the woods, but I never got those kind of feelings from moose. So I didn't know what to think. I just knew that something I wasn't familiar with was watching me. There was actually a point where I was wondering if maybe there was some wolves watching me or something, but I didn't have anything to go on. I didn't have anything to back that up. So I kept on walking. Like I said, this straight stretch was about a half a mile or so long, and I get probably about an eighth, probably about an eighth of a mile down this straight stretch, and I hear it, but I want to say a stick break, but it was a big stick. It sounded like a log snapping off to my right, and it just scared the hell out of me. I just instantly froze, and I'm looking off into the woods, and I can see a little bit into the woods. The woods weren't too thick here. They were still thicker, quite a bit thicker than they were back at the beginning, but they weren't so bad. Had some undergrowth and some brush on the ground, but just wasn't seeing anything. I mean, the only thing you'd really see was the trunks of the spruces. They were black. Birch was the kind of trees that we had up there. The leaf ones, they were white, gray, and then of course you had the snow. So it's just this black and white, scene in front of me. And then it wasn't that light anyway because it was really overcast and snowing. So I just couldn't see anything out there. I didn't really know what to think of that. Figure if there was something out there, it wouldn't be too hard to see. But so I keep walking, and this feeling is still on me, and trying to think of what should happen next. This was off to my right side. I heard something off to my left side, and I'm trying to remember what it was. If it was another stick breaking, or if it was I seem to want to think that it was like the sound of a piece of wood knocking against another wood. I've heard of that before. I think they call that. I think they just call it wood knocking. But at the time, I wasn't thinking about that. But I seem to remember that's what I heard was like a wood knocking sound, but it was back off behind me to my left. And the first thing that I had heard, the snapping a stick was just slightly up ahead of me to my right, and it got me wondering, got me thinking, whatever's out there, there must be two, at least two. And when I heard that, I froze again. And whenever I would freeze, I wouldn't hear anything. And I'm just sitting there frozen, and I'm looking very slowly left and right off into the woods, trying to figure out what it was. Not seeing anything. Left side of the road was a lot bigger than the right side. I couldn't see into the left side at all. And after what seemed like several minutes, but was probably just, several seconds, I started walking again. And whatever was off to the left of me was, I could actually hear it, kind of like walking through the woods. I could hear it, stepping through the snow and stepping on the twigs and the branches and stuff that were actually under the snow. And it sounded like it was still good, I don't know, probably 30, 40 yards off into the woods. So it wasn't like right just inside the tree line or anything, but it was close enough that I could actually hear it walking. And it wasn't trying to be, the thing that was killing me about it wasn't trying to be silent or anything. Whatever it was beyond the point of caring if I knew it was there or not. And I would walk down the road, and I would hear it take steps. And when I'd hear these steps, I would freeze. I would stop moving. And it would take just one or two steps more, and then it would stop moving. And I would take a couple of more, and it would take a couple of more. And this went on for, just a short amount of time. And I started hearing this clicking sound. I don't really know the best way to describe it. It was kind of like the sound like jockeys or equestrians make when they're trying to urge their horses to walk forward or whatever. Just a kind of sound. And I heard something very similar to that. And it come from whatever it was that was pacing me off to the right. And then right after it did that, I heard something moving off to the left behind me again. That whatever it was, that same creature, I think, that had done the wood knocking sound. I could hear it moving up to alongside the left of me, and I looked over that way, and I still couldn't see anything. And at this point, I just stayed frozen for what felt like several minutes. Probably wasn't more than just a minute or two, though. And after what seemed like an eternity, just scanning around, looking left and right, trying to figure out what was out there, all of a sudden, whatever was off to the right of me just starts tearing through the woods, and I can hear its feet pounding on the ground as it's. I don't think it was running, but I think it was moving really, like moving with a purpose, and it was coming right towards me. And I can hear the branches and the trees snapping off, like it was pulling them down and breaking them. It was just trying to make as much noise as it really could. Never heard any vocal sounds or anything, but I definitely heard, coming through the woods. It sounded like an elephant, going through thick trees. And it gets up to within just far enough away that I couldn't see what it was. I could see the snow falling off the limbs of the trees up in the air, falling down to the air as it was moving through these trees. I could see that, but I could never actually see what was going through them. And it gets up to the point where I'm thinking at any moment it's going to pop through these trees and just get me. And then it just halts. It just stops. And I can hear it breathing. And it's not like it was, panting really hard, but I can hear it breathing really heavily. And it sounds like it's got just the lung capacity of like a horse, just this really deep breaths in and breaths back out. And it scared the hell out of me. I took off at a really, really fast rate. I didn't run. I was thinking to myself, if it was a bear, the last thing I want to do is run. But I was walking as fast as I could. And I could hear whatever the creature was on the left, I could hear it walking behind me. And I was glancing back behind me over my shoulder. And it didn't come out on the road or anything, but I could still hear it walking through the woods. And I'm getting up, as I was getting up towards this corner of the road, I was just praying that if I got around this corner, that whatever these creatures were, that they would, that would be enough, and they would just leave me alone. And so the one back behind me on the left, it's still off in the woods, kind of pacing me, keeping up with me. I don't hear anything more out of whatever it was on the right, but I can't even describe really how scared I was. I was in fear. I was starting to think maybe it was a bear or two bears, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And the strange thing is, I never even thought about this shotgun that I had. It never even occurred to me to get it out. I was too panicked by what was going on around me. I made it up to the curve in the road, and I'm damn near at a jog now. And I start around this curve, and it's just like coming into the whole situation. As soon as I got to the point where the straightaway of the road behind me started to disappear around the corner, just this feeling of relief came over me. I was still scared. I was still scared to death, but I felt like I wasn't being pursued anymore. I had this feeling of, I think things are going to be okay. I tell you, I damn near jogged the entire way back to my truck. It's still, at least 6 miles away. And I have this rucksack on. I'm wearing these thermal boots. They call them bunny boots up there. The going was not easy, but I had pure adrenaline on my side. I jogged. I think I jogged the entire way there. And while I'm heading back to my truck, I'm this whole scene that had just unfolded is replaying over and over in my head, and I'm going through my mind trying to figure out what had just happened, and I'm just not coming up with anything viable. And I'm thinking about what had happened back up on that mountain when I was working for the Forest Service when I was a teenager. And I'm thinking about what I had seen when I was, around 12 or so with my mom back in Oregon. And I'm thinking to myself, is it possible? Could this be happening? Could these be the same thing? And I kept trying to talk myself out of thinking that, because as far as I knew, those creatures didn't live in Alaska, at least not that part of Alaska. I'm in, up near Anchorage. There's not many Bigfoot sightings up in that part of the state. And so this is all running through my mind, and I'm getting closer back to my truck, and about a half mile from the truck or so, and I hear something come tearing through the woods again. And I was like, oh God, this is it. This is it. They let me get this far, and this is where it all ends right now. And this big cow moose comes running out of the woods up onto the road, and crosses the road and jumps down into the brush on the other side of the road. And I honestly expected something to come flying out behind it. Nothing did, though. Well, I can't say that it was by itself, but if there was something behind it, it didn't come out on the road. But it scared the life out of me. I about let some tears go right there. I was only about a half mile from the truck, and at that point, I just ran as fast as I could the rest of the way to the truck, went around the gate, threw my bag in the back of my truck, got in, and I headed back for base. I got back to the barracks and I called my platoon sergeant. Told him I was back, that I'd made it out. He asked me if I had my phone. I had to remind him that was what I was calling him on. Told him I'd give him his phone the next day when I saw him, and yes, everything went fine. I didn't tell him a thing. There wasn't anything to tell him. I wasn't going to try and articulate what I had just gone through the last several hours to him. I didn't even know where to begin, and I didn't know if he'd believe me anyway. But never been back out there. Never did any more training out there in that Bulldog area. But what's interesting, I've been doing a lot of listening to Coast to Coast and Sasquatch Chronicles and everything in the last several weeks and whatnot. Is about all I have to do is listen to podcasts while I'm driving. And actually, I think maybe I'll talk to you about that offline. But there's some other interesting things that happened after that I never thought might be coincidental or tied in with what was going on with me until I started listening to some of this other stuff on those radio programs.
So
that was that adventure.
So when you never actually saw anything, right?
No, this whole encounter, I never ever actually saw a thing. The closest I came to seeing anything was whatever was coming through those trees to begin with. Back on that straightaway, I could see it. I could see the top of the trees moving from being hit, and I could see the snow falling out of them. But nothing ever actually made an appearance. And you know what? I'll be perfectly honest. I am so glad it didn't. I don't know if I could have handled that.
When the moose came out of the woods, did you get that feeling of dread like you did up on the corner prior to getting up to where the moose was?
Well, I kind of had, when I heard that moose coming through the woods, I did get that feeling again, but I got that feeling, I think I only got that feeling because I was expecting whatever was messing with me back down the road, and cut cross country and was coming out there. And then when the moose came out, I still felt like maybe whatever was messing with me was hot on its trail and was going to pop out behind it, like maybe it had flushed the moose out. But I never heard anything else besides the moose, and I didn't really have that awful feeling of being, watched or pursued. I just had this feeling of terror before I actually saw the moose, and while I was watching the moose run across the road, because the moose was booking. It was. I'm 100% convinced that something did flush the moose out, but it never came up to the road, and it never made any noises. I don't think the moose was just. It wasn't moving like it was just trying to get from point A to point B. They'll kind of do that trot that they do when they're just trying to cover ground. This thing was flat booking it, so I do feel like something flushed it out. But I never saw what it was.
Right, but the fear that you felt at that point was based on the fact that you heard the moose, right? It didn't happen until you heard the moose coming through the woods, correct?
Right, no, up until I heard the moose, I was still scared. I was still, looking back over my shoulder every 5 seconds and stuff, but mostly I was just preoccupied with trying to comprehend what had just happened. I didn't...
But you didn't have that feeling of being watched like you did at that corner.
No, I didn't have that feeling of being watched anymore. That terror had kind of subsided and gone away, and now it was mostly just trying to comprehend what had happened.
That's interesting because a lot of people who report encounters in the woods, they report the same thing, is that they get this feeling of being watched that comes over them. And they'll...
Well, I mean, I honestly think that the feelings that we get like we're being watched, I honestly think that is a kind of a throwback to our ancient history when we were, you know, when we were not always the predator, when we used to be the prey in some cases. I feel like that is a trait that humans have just never lost, kind of like a sixth sense.
Well, there's actually been scientific-ish studies done on this. Like, you know, people, they can be sleeping or whatever, and they'll suddenly wake up when somebody's staring at them and that kind of thing. That's actually considered a known effect or whatever, that when somebody is staring at you, you can actually tell, and you'll get the feeling that you're being watched. That's a known
Really?
A known thing, yeah. So, but I don't think that you would get that off of something like a moose. I don't think a moose would actually watch. Well, I guess it would if it had a young with it or something like that. But I don't think it would be the same kind of feeling. But I mean, I could be wrong. But it seems to me that it would have to be something with intent, you know. So I find it interesting that you felt the feeling when you were up around that corner, but you didn't get it prior to the moose coming out of the woods until you actually heard it coming through the woods.
No, I did not get it prior to the moose. All I got prior to the moose was I still very much had the urge to get the hell out of there, but I did not have the feeling of an impending doom so much. It did kind of happen, you know, when I heard it crashing through the woods. I didn't know what was coming at me, but yeah, so
that's a different kind of fear. That's just
a
fear of the unknown sound coming towards you. That's just a different fear. It's the fear of an unknown sound coming at you. That's, you know, applies in any situation. It could be a raccoon charging at you, and just because you don't know what it is, you'll be, what the heck is that? You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
When you were back there and you heard the thing walking, when it started basically letting itself be known, and you could hear the footsteps, was it only the one on the right that you heard, or could you hear both of them? The one on the right and the left? Initially,
it was only the one that I could hear. It wasn't until after what I think was a bluff charge, because I think if it was a full-on charge, I obviously would have seen the creature, but I think it was a bluff charge. But it wasn't until after that I could hear the one on the other side, on my left side behind me, start pacing me. So at the beginning, I could only hear just the one. There at the end, when I was, you know, trying to get out of there, I could actually hear the other one. It was there was you know, at one point I was wondering if it was the same creature, but after it couldn't have gotten around me that fast. I mean, there was things happening on both sides of me at the same time, and that's when I realized that there was obviously more than one out there.
So when you were walking and you said you could hear the one walking and then you'd stop and it would stop, was that happening on both sides or just the one on the right side?
That was just happening on the one side. I had no idea that there was anything on the other side until I heard that you know, clicking sound. That I thought it was just the one animal out there that I was dealing with, and then I heard that.
So the clicking sound, that came from the left?
That is what, huh?
You heard the clicking sound come from the left side or the right side?
Trying to think. I'm pretty sure I heard it from the right side. Yeah, I heard it from the right side because I remember hearing what sounded like the wood knocking noise. It was only just one clapping sound. But I heard that from the left. So yeah, the clicking noise came from the right.
And how far away did the wood knock seem to be when you heard it?
How far away was the what?
The wood knock. Was it right there on top of you, or was
best guess, based on how far I could see off into the woods and how far away it sounded, I would say it was probably 50 or more yards off into the woods.
So the one on the right was pacing you, and then when it stopped, you heard the one on the left start pacing you, and you never heard the one on the. You never heard the one on the right again after that.
No, the one on the right's the one that I'm pretty sure the one on the right's the one that did the charge. The one on the left was the one that did the tree knock, and then that was the one that did the that kind of was pacing me as I was getting the hell out of there. The one on the right's the one that was initially pacing me when I first came around that curve, and it was the first thing that I heard. And
then you heard.
It was the first one that.
And then the one on the right just stopped. You didn't hear from it at all after that, but you continued to hear the one on the left, right? Correct, I should say.
No. The one on the right was the one that I heard pacing me initially, and then after I had stopped that first time, I heard the kind of the clicking noise, and then that was followed by the wood knock sound off to the left. And then after the wood knock sound, that was the last I heard out of the one on the left for a while. After the wood knock sound is when the one on the right made its charge, or its bluff charge, and it came tearing through the woods, and when it stopped is when I took off, basically running. And as I was running, I could hear the one on the left kind of pacing me off in the woods, like almost like it was trying to make sure that I just kept going.
Right, but at that point, you never heard anything from the one on the right at all after that, right?
Yeah, that was the last I heard from the one on the right. I didn't hear anything out of it anymore. The one on the left was the one that was pacing me.
And then as you got farther up the road, the moose that came charging out, it came charging out from the right side?
Yeah, the moose came charging out from the right side, but this was a lot further up the road. This was the better part of 5 miles up the road.
But when the moose came running out of the woods, did you hear anything on the right or the left that could have been, one of these Sasquatch or anything like that?
I don't have any idea exactly what it was. I mean, I didn't see or hear anything to give me any idea that there was anything chasing that moose. I only saw and heard the moose. It was acting like it was running away from something, but other than the way it was acting, there was no indicators that there was actually something behind it. And where it came out from the right. Well, not very far back in the trees is where the base of one of these one of these mountains kind of starts. So it starts getting steep in there pretty quick. And then off on the left side where I was at, it was just a small little embankment, not too bad. And then there's a creek right there. And then on the other side of that creek is actually a golf course. Obviously, it was closed for winter, but it was an open area. One of the greens was right there.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd have gone all the way in there for my cell phone. What did the camera crew from Samsung have to say?
Well, looking back on it, I kind of wish I hadn't done it, but it was a new phone, and I was not trying to lose it. I didn't have any insurance or anything on it.
Yep, I know. But that sounds like it was quite the journey you had going out there, Sasquatch or no Sasquatch. I mean that alone, I don't know if I would have gone out there just for my phone. But
Well, looking back on it, it wasn't the brightest idea, especially with the way the weather was turning out.
yeah. Did you ever smell the Sasquatch?
No, I don't. You know, you and I had talked about that last time we had talked, and I just don't really remember smelling anything that time. I thought about it more later, and I don't have that memory of smelling anything that time.
But you did smell them the first 2 times that you had the encounter when you were younger, though, right? Both times?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I remember smelling them those first 2 times when I was younger, but I just don't have any strong memories of smelling anything this time.
Now, thinking back on the whole situation, what do you think was actually happening there? First of all, let's how long did it take from the time when you were walking in and you passed through that area and you got that feeling of being watched, and then you went up and got your phone? How much time went by between the time you went through there the first time and the time you went through there a second time?
How much time had elapsed?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say less than an hour.
Really, that quick, huh?
Less than an hour, but it was evening time already. When I was going through there, it was probably, when I was going in, it was probably getting close to, I don't know, it had to be sometime after 4:30 maybe. And then when I was coming back through there, you know, I was pushing 5:30 or 6, you know, and 5:30 or 6 in Alaska, it's been dark for a while, you know, in the winter.
Yeah. They only have like an hour of sunshine in the wintertime, don't they? Something like that? Some ridiculous small amount?
Well, down in Anchorage in the dead of winter, we get about, I want to say about 4 to 5 hours of useful daylight a day. And then, of course, in the summer, it's the exact opposite. We only have 4 or 5 hours of dark, but it never really gets totally dark, you know. We're still a good several hundred miles south of the Arctic Circle at that point.
How much how much distance was it? This whole the zone of uneasiness. How far was it? How was it? 100 yards or 50 yards or a mile?
The whole zone of uneasiness. I like that. It was from the time I went around the first corner to the time that I went got around the second corner, and I would say that it was, you know, between 1/3 and 1/2 of a mile probably.
And that was still a good 6 miles from where your truck was, from the gate.
Yeah, that was somewhere in there. I think that it was about 6 miles from where the gate was to that particular area. And then I want to say that it was probably about 7 miles total to about where my phone was.
And the moose came out fairly close to where your truck was, right?
Yeah, the moose came out within about a half a mile from my truck.
And farther back in there, you mentioned there's a golf course, but as you go deeper in there, is it just turn into just pure wilderness?
Yeah, it just turned, well, when you leave the Glen Highway, you do this, doing a straight 90 degrees off the Glen Highway back in here, and you go through this long valley, and the road's actually called Arctic Valley Road, and there's about a couple of miles in. This whole thing didn't happen that far off the highway. The whole like where the moose thing happened, I could hear the highway. It's not that far away, just a couple of miles. I could hear the trucks moving on the highway, and right before you get to this area where the gate is, you actually go by. There's a golf club on the left, and then there's a portion of the golf course itself on the right. And just after the golf course, you turn off Arctic Valley Road down to the right, and head down to the creek there, Ship Creek, and there's a little parking area, and that's where the gate is.
Is that the famous Schitt's Creek? Up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Is that the famous Up Schitt's Creek without a paddle? Is that?
Oh, no, I've heard other people make that joke too, but no, it's Ship Creek, SHIP.
Oh,
no T. That would be an appropriate name for it, though.
Yeah,
but
with all the Sasquatch around there, yeah.
But no, there's the golf course, and then the creek, and then the road I was walking on, and then on the other side of the road is where the mountains actually start. I was walking along the foothills for the first, the vast majority of this walk, and it wasn't until several miles into it that you actually do a hard left, and then you start walking actually up into the foothills where this training area is.
And that hard left is where the Sasquatch were?
It was another mile and a half, 2 miles after that. So this long first straight stretch is probably about 4 miles long, and then you get the that hard left, and then there's about another mile and a half, 2 miles past that hard left where the terrain actually starts turning into foothills, going from flat.
In this area where you said you could hear the highway, was this area you could still hear the highway, or was it much farther back into the wilderness kind of area?
No, it's further back. You can't hear the highway anymore at this point.
So the area where you actually encountered the Sasquatch was fairly removed from any kind of traffic from people and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's pretty remote. It's pretty remote to begin with. I mean, it's fenced off. We're on a military base, and so first and foremost, you're not supposed to be back there anyway. And then second of all, you got it's fenced off military reservation, and then on top of that, it's back in there a good few miles. At that point from the highway, it's probably a full 4 miles at least, if not more, from the highway. The closest structure, or the closest civilization to that point, is about 4 miles, and that's the Anchorage power plant right there as you're coming into the city from the north.
And
but that's still several miles away where this all happened.
You had a blizzard going at the same time?
I wouldn't call it a blizzard. It was just turning into a heavy snow.
So you walked 6 miles in knee-deep snow to get your GS2. That still kills me.
It was getting about knee-deep by the time I got out of there, yeah. When I walked in, it was about 10 or 12 inches probably, but it was all powder. It wasn't too hard going.
I was dedicated, man. Dedicated. Hey, I was able to look into that stuff that you had brought up when we were talking offline, about the Dyatlov Pass.
About what?
The Dyatlov Pass incident.
Oh, the Dyatlov Pass?
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Quite the mystery.
Yeah, did you look into that?
Yeah, I watched a couple of things on it. Pretty interesting.
Did you find any references to that photograph?
To what photograph now?
Did you find any references to that photograph of that, whatever that was, that creature that was peering out from behind the trees that they had taken a picture of? Some of the documentaries and the studies that I've watched about that incident, they mention it, and others they don't mention it. And so I'm having a hard time figuring out if that really happened, or I mean, obviously the incident really happened, but I'm having a hard time figuring out if that creature, that photograph of that creature that they said one of the guys took, if that really happened or if that was just somebody's speculation.
Oh, one of the guys that was killed took a picture of something? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
I think I did run across...
Yeah, it just depends on which... Say again?
I think I did run across a mention of something like that, but I never actually found like the photograph itself I think it was just mentioned once somewhere. And then, because I completely forgot about it.
Well, I have a copy of the photograph, and I'll send you... I'll email you a copy of that photograph. But like I said, it's just depending on which version, which documentary you actually watch about it. Sometimes they mention it and sometimes they don't. So I'm not sure if that's what that's about.
Well, have you watched any documentaries where they're speculating that it was actually some kind of a Bigfoot that may have done all of this?
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Because I haven't found anything. What I watched said that it was just a mystery, and actually, I don't think anyone even speculated that it was a Bigfoot at all. I think they mentioned it, like somebody said, yeah, and somebody even thought maybe it was a Bigfoot, and that was like the end of it. But based on what I saw,
go
ahead.
I saw one where they were speculating that that's what they thought had happened, was that it was some sort of a creature. They were hinting that it was some sort of a Sasquatch type creature that had ultimately scared these hikers so bad that they had cut their way out of their tent and basically in their underwear and taken off down the side of this mountain in a blizzard. And then but they were saying they never did find any tracks of any kind of creature that would have been around their tent. And then these other people were saying when the initial investigators got there and found the site, that they didn't cordon off the area at all. They just went tramping in there, looking for survivors and whatnot. And so there was just thousands of tracks of all these searchers all over the area, and that they wouldn't have been able to find any tracks anyway, which I don't think is likely, because they would have been able to find tracks coming down from somewhere, whether it's coming up from the tree line down below them or coming down from higher up the ridge line or something.
Right.
I think they would have found some tracks. So I don't personally think that that's what happened. I don't have any theory of what I think happened to them, but I don't think that was what happened to them.
Oh, you don't think it was a Bigfoot?
No, I don't really think it was a Bigfoot.
Well, I don't think that there's any other explanation, actually. I mean, they went in there and they trampled all over the place, and they talk about how some of them left and they didn't even have their socks on, which means they found they found bare footprints.
They were just absolutely unprepared to go outside.
Well, that means to me that they found bare footprints, right? So if you were up there and you saw barefoot footprints in the snow, that would be your assumption, is that they left, they didn't even have socks on. You know what I'm saying? But who's to say that those bare footprints weren't a Sasquatch? Now, obviously I have no clue. And there's really a huge absence of evidence, pointing to anything. But my perspective is that the only evidence that does exist to what did happen is they were scared. They were so scared that they didn't go back.
Right.
They climbed a tree so that they could see where their tent was, meaning they were looking for something to see if whatever it was that scared them off was still there, and that there were barefoot footprints in the snow. Well, the only things that those facts fit is that a Bigfoot was there. And if everyone came in there and trampled all over the place and assumed that the barefoot tracks were from the people who were fleeing, and it was actually a Bigfoot, and then they walked all over him to where you could no longer tell what was what anymore, that would be the end of the evidence. Right?
Right, and that makes a lot of sense. Whatever it was, it scared them. It scared them so bad that the idea of going back to their tent, which is where, you know, they had heat and warm clothes, and they had they had knives, and I don't think they had any guns with them, but I know that they had knives and stuff. All that stuff was up there in their tent. Everything that they needed to stay alive was up there in their tent. And whatever was up there, there was not a chance in hell they were going for it. So,
well, they did find 3 of them. I guess at the very end, they tried to crawl back to the campsite, and they ended up dying of exposure about like 100 feet or something from the tent, trying to get back to it. But
yeah, but. And that's a good point, but you gotta wonder what was out there that was so terrible and so scary that the idea of freezing to death seemed like the better idea.
Well, I mean, I could see it if it was a Sasquatch, but here's the thing of it is that they cut their way out of the tent, and from the photographs, they cut their way out of the tent and then traveled downhill from where they cut their way out of the tent in a straight line to the edge of the woods, almost as if whatever it was that scared them was on the opposite side of the tent, and they were trying to keep the tent between them and it, as if to
right.
So that the tent would conceal their escape. That's what it looked like to me. But then I have to wonder.
Yeah, that's what it looked like to me too.
Whatever it was, how did they know it was there? You know, because they didn't open up because the front tent flap was actually on that side. The side that was opposite the direction they went. So they would have had to have looked out the tent flap. What's that?
I'm not convinced that they ever saw what it was before they left the tent. I said I'm not entirely convinced that they ever actually saw what it was before they left the tent. I think whatever it was that scared them so bad initially, they were just hearing it.
Yeah, actually, and it's funny you say that because I'm looking at the comments, and Nicole has made 2 comments. She asked if the tent was destroyed, and it was, but it doesn't appear that it was destroyed by like a Bigfoot or something. It was, they cut a hole in it, they weakened the structure of it. One of the tent pegs was broken on the side where they escaped, and then there was a bunch of snow on top of it. But it had been like, what was it, a month or 2 months before they got up there, so it could have succumbed to just, you know, a heavy snowfall pushing the top of the tent down because it had been weakened by cutting it open, and one of the tent pegs or one of the supporting sticks was broken. And then she also mentions, the same woman, infrasound. And I was actually thinking the same thing when you said that if something was outside the tent in that direction that was using infrasound to try and, you know, get them to come out of the tent, it you know, infrasound has all kinds of different effects on people, and it makes people afraid. It makes them, I guess, hallucinate, get sick. I mean, there's all kinds of effects it can have. But the infrasound, if they knew the infrasound was coming from that direction and it was terrifying them, I could see them cutting their way out of the tent and fleeing like that. And then once they cut their way out of the tent, you know, maybe they saw the thing. Who knows? I don't understand why the thing wouldn't have chased them down to the wood line, though.
I don't know either. You know, when I first heard of infrasound, I thought it was a crock. I had never heard of it, and I got to listening to some other people talk about it, and found out that it was a real thing. And apparently, big cats use infrasound, and I'm not sure if it's for sure or if it's just speculation that some of the great apes use infrasound too. And then after I learned that, I got to thinking, well, that's actually, now that's kind of a pretty plausible idea. And if infrasound was, if there was a Sasquatch up on the side of that mountain, then infrasound actually makes a lot of sense.
Well, I learned about infrasound a long time ago. I mean, I don't remember. I took a course in zoology at Harvard when I was in school. It was nothing like a PhD kind of real course. It was something that they had grade school kids go through, and you got a certificate, and you took a couple of months and that kind of thing. And I can't remember if we learned about it there or if I ended up watching, but it was around the same time I heard like elephants used in infrasound, and that an elephant, the infrasound off of an elephant, and they can do it when they smack their foot on the ground, that they can actually create an infrasound wave that'll kill a man or a tiger. They've actually killed tigers with it. And they can communicate with each other across like a dozen miles with the infrasound. Yeah, I knew that long time ago. Yeah. So infrasound's been around. It's been known for a long time. I don't think that they were aware of like the extent that other animals used infrasound until, recently, within maybe the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years, whatever. But
well, I've listened to a lot of reports on Sasquatch where the witnesses, the people that were involved in the actual sighting, said that they had felt like, usually they always say that they heard the creature emitting kind of it was a low sound decibel wise, but it was a very powerful, like a bass sound, to the point where you could actually feel it in your body. It wasn't terribly loud, but it was very powerful. And if that was what was happening up on the side of that mountain to those hikers that night, it would explain a lot about why they acted the way they did.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, why they fled, but it doesn't really explain why they stayed gone. Why, and then they separated into two different groups. There was one group that went and dug, I forgot what they called it, some kind of hole in the snow. I think they called it a mole hole or something like that, to try and stay warm. And they ended up dying there. But those were the ones who had the crushed ribs and that kind of crushed skulls, I think. And those kind of injuries were the ones they found in that hole.
I don't know how powerful the infrasound from a Sasquatch could actually get, but they were the autopsies on those hikers. I think it was 2 or 3 of them showed that they had broken ribs and all sorts of internal injuries without any sign of external injuries. And that sounds kind of like what you hear from a concussion blast from a bomb going off or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that was one of the theories that I heard on what the documentary I think I watched, was that they said that their injuries were consistent with a blast, being in close proximity to some kind of a blast. So that's where they thought maybe it was a military test of some kind, that they had set off some kind of a weapon, and that's what happened, is that they were caught out there while they were doing this test, and that's why some of them had the injuries that they had. But then they couldn't explain, well, why did they have injuries and the other ones didn't? That was unexplained. The whole thing is a really crazy mystery. They stayed away, so obviously the threat remained for some period of time. And this whole splitting up into two groups. There's a lot of theories
about what actually happened up there.
Yeah, there's all kinds, everything from UFOs to the military, all kinds of theories, but there's no evidence to back up.
I've heard everything from their government was doing, weapons testing up there, to I've even heard that our government was doing weapons testing out there, and I really highly doubt that's the case. But there is 100 theories about what happened to those poor people that night. To be honest, I don't think we'll ever know what did.
No, of course not. But I heard one of the theories was that the U.S. government had a group of spies that went in there to spy on, because they had some military testing areas around there for the Russians or whatever.
Yeah.
And they thought, well, maybe the U.S. government sent in some spies to check on those, and they ran across them, and they said, well, we can't let them go because they'll tell them we were here, and they think that's what happened. But the injuries aren't consistent. If that was what happened, they would have just shot him. They're not gonna. Well, let's bust this guy up. Let's cut this girl's tongue out. Let's do all this crazy stuff. They're not going to do that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've heard that theory also, and it went on. The theory that I was listening to went on further to say that they were, because the scene that the searchers found didn't make any kind of sense at all, and one of the working theories was that these searchers may have actually stumbled across the scene while they were, whoever did this was trying to cover it up and make it look like something else, and they hadn't gotten a chance to actually finish the cover up, and that's why nothing made any kind of sense when they found it.
Right. Yeah, I kind of wondered if it wasn't the one guy. There was one guy, they said he lost it at one point, and he got crazy angry at everybody. And this was before, because one of the guys got sick.
Yeah.
One of the guys got sick and he went back. He never actually went on the whole trip with them. And he was talking about how the one guy had kind of lost it. And they said he was a really quiet guy, but then this one time he just really lost it and got like amazingly angry, so bad that they were all afraid of him.
Yeah, they I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name, but yeah, he was apparently on the way out there. They had gotten off the train at some train station, and he had gotten very irate with some police officers, and they had thrown him in jail overnight, and they ultimately released him the next morning. And once they got further out there, when they were actually doing their hike, there some disagreement over something stupid, like where everyone was going to sleep in the tent or something, had set this guy off, and he had gotten so belligerent and violent that he had actually scared the crap out of everybody else in the group, and they all just kind of avoided him and avoided talking to him the rest of the trip. This was written down in their diary.
Yeah, that was one of the theories. That was one of the theories, is that it had something to do with him. But he was one of the ones they found dead, so it couldn't have been,
Yeah, they found him dead, and they had, down there in the woodline where they were, they had one knife with them, and that was the one that they speculated they'd used to cut their way out of the tent. All the rest of the knives were up in the tent still, and they didn't have any guns. So I don't ultimately think that he had anything to do with what happened to them.
Yeah, and the fact that they didn't take any other weapons with them or anything like that, it just points to, extreme, not just fear, but total and utter terror, to the point where your mind stops thinking, and you just go, your subconscious mind takes over. It's fight or flight, and when you're in that mode, you're incapable of thinking logically, because if you were in a situation where something was happening, and you're military, I was military, we're kind of trained to react to certain situations and to know, okay, you got to do this, you got to get your gun, you got to, all of this stuff that you have to do in certain situations. Even though civilians aren't trained that way, which evidently these people were, because in Russia there's a conscript program where everybody actually has to serve time in the military. So all of these people were
conscription shit.
Yeah, they were all at some level, had some kind of training to keep present in situations. So for them to just take off without taking a knife, whatever's scaring you, a knife is obviously a weapon. They didn't think to grab a knife to fight off whatever it was.
Well, Well, I mean, looking back on what happened to me in Alaska, I can almost kind of rationalize it, because when I was in the middle of my encounter, I had a shotgun with me, and I was so scared of what was going on that it never even crossed my mind to get it out of. I had it in a scabbard on my rucksack, and it never even occurred to me to pull it out.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. If you had seen a mountain lion coming out of the woods, would you have pulled the shotgun?
I would like to think so, yes. I would like to think that I would have pulled the shotgun.
Right, but the feeling that you had, similar to the feeling that they had at that Dyatlov Pass, was so much terror that it completely scrambled their ability to think. As it did to you when you were out there, because you never thought about the shotgun. You were just, that terror level was so high that you just, you go into autopilot. And you don't think about those kinds of things.
When I absolutely agree. Autopilot, it was fight or flight, and for me it was flight. And I got the hell out of there, and I got in my truck, and I went back to my barracks. And after I called my platoon sergeant and told him that I was back and everything, I just sat down. I remember sitting down on my bed, and I just cried.
Yeah, it's the release.
That huge weight had been lifted off of me.
Yeah, and that only comes from when it's, absolute sheer terror hits you. And that's what happened to those people up on that pass. And, there's only so many things that I don't think, if it was the military out there doing something, I don't think they would have reacted the way that they did. I think that they would have said, oh, crap, the military's here. They're yelling at us to come out, All right, put your shoes on. Let's see what the hell they want, Damn military, that kind of thing. They might have been nervous about what they might do to them.
Yeah.
But over there, it was probably commonplace.
Well, there was a... Right. Well, one thing that really confuses me about that whole incident up there on that pass is that did they happen to mention in any of the videos that you watched that the investigation on what had happened to those guys was opened like 2 or 3 days before they were even reported missing?
Oh yeah, yeah. And they said that was an accident.
That's
but how do you do that by accident? That would be precognition, I think I need to open this case.
Well, the dean at the school said that he had opened the investigation because he thought it was a different group. There was 2 groups that were actually out doing this hike. They weren't anywhere near the same areas, but they were gone at the same time frame doing these 2 different hikes. And he thought it was the other group that hadn't called in and said that they had made it out and had opened an investigation on them, he said, even though he apparently named the people in the group that actually was missing. And he ended up resigning over that.
Yeah, well, he had said what I recall that story being is that the dean told everybody that Dyatlov had notified them that they were on their way back. And so he never bothered to search for them. And when in reality it was actually the other group that had notified them they were on their way back, but he thought it was the Dyatlov group. That's what I heard them say. I don't know about I thought the investigation I thought was started by the law, but I might be remembering incorrectly.
Well, it sounds to me like the investigation was started by the dean.
Oh, I'll have to look again. I don't remember. I might have just assumed it was a law investigation.
Either way, it was a series of very ridiculous mistakes made. That started that investigation, and it didn't add up. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and that's how conspiracy theories come up, but it doesn't mean that sometimes crap like that does happen. Just weird crap happens and coincidentally, at the same time, I'm not saying that's what this is, but I'm saying it does happen. You do have weird coincidences that make things look one way and they're really not. You know, but like you said, we'll never know what the truth is. You know, because regardless of the investigation, if this had something to do with the government and therefore they tried to cover it up, and that's why this paper trail shows an investigation started before they ever should have, blah, blah, blah. There should be some evidence somewhere at the scene that shows that that's what happened. And there's nothing.
Right.
You know, there was snow. There was...
And even...
Go ahead.
I was going to say that, there was nothing. And even if, you know, the government in Russia does know what happened, even if they do know what happens, we'll never know. We'll never find out, because there is nobody in the history of the world that is better at keeping secrets than Soviet-era Russia was.
Right.
And I'm convinced that if anyone does know, I mean, assuming they're even still alive, if anybody does know, they're still not going to say anything.
I think they said the last last person that was alive from then just died back in 2012 or something like that. So there's nobody left that would know anymore. So it's pretty much done.
They were trying to pin that on everyone. They were trying to even pin that on the natives that lived in that area.
Oh yeah.
And the natives, you know, they weren't having any of that. As a matter of fact, they were the main ones that were out there searching for these people when it became apparent that they were missing. Yeah,
they got cleared pretty quickly within a couple of days, I think.
Yeah.
What that one guy said.
It was it's an interesting case, though. It really is. It's I'd love to know what happened out there, but I don't think we ever will. You know, like you said, that's how conspiracy theories go. And speaking of conspiracy theories, I just read today that the president is releasing all the confidential classified documents on the JFK case.
Really?
So that ought to be interesting. Conspiracy theorists ought to be coming out of the woodwork on that one.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ryan, we've got an hour and 20 minutes. We've gone a little over, and I guess it's time to close out the show. I will talk to you offline here after I close the show. So, folks, remember, every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be doing a live show from now on. Hopefully, you know, like tonight, Ryan was busy getting his truck filled or, you know, loaded up for his trip. So we had to delay tonight's show till 10 o'clock. But from now on, you know, if everything goes right, it should be 9 o'clock every Sunday. If not, it'll be, you know, maybe a little bit later. But just click the little bell icon. Where am I at? Over here. On the subscribe thing, click that bell icon, and anytime I have a live show coming up and I have it scheduled, you'll get notified and you'll know, you know, if it's going to be early or late or whatever, because I'm going to start using that scheduling function so everyone knows exactly when the live show will be. And let me get my contact information here. Well, thanks, Julie. Yeah, I see your comment there. Nicole, the natives never said any. At least I haven't heard anything about what the natives thought. Well, maybe we'll talk some. Maybe next week we'll do another show where we talk all about this Dyatlov Pass thing. Anyway, folks, as usual, if you want to get a hold of me, sassiteblogspot.com is where you can hear the audio only version. I actually need to put the last couple of episodes up there. I haven't done that in a while. And you can get a hold of me at sasquatchhypotheses@gmail.com. Glad you're safe, Ryan. Thank you for your service. Oh, she's thanking you for your service, Ryan. Ryan can still hear me. You there, Ryan?
Yep.
Yeah. Nicole Says, glad you're safe, Ryan. Thank you for your service to both of us. All right, folks, until next time, y'all take it easy.